Hello, welcome back to the Handstandcast with me, Emmett Lewis, and my co-host, Mikael Christiansen. How's it going, Mikael?
Yeah, not too bad. Not much news since last time, I think. Same shit, different day. You?
We're still on March the 904th of July of lockdown. So, I don't know, things are beginning to get open. My gyms are back open, so I can go back training, which is nice. But we have, I don't know if you have the restrictions, but we have the restrictions here of, what was it? That sound is Mikael folding a face.
Ah, sorry, yeah, I need to stop doing the folding while I had the paper there and I was like, ooh, what is this?
Maybe we need to live stream a folding, so could we get one of those ASMR videos or ASMR podcasts of just the crease folds and the crease sounds?
Yeah, there's a lot of nice sounds if you have the right papers. There's very satisfying sounds.
Yeah, could be I don't know, the original roots of industrial music was one of the guys figuring out that I think the story goes listening to elevator sounds and going, hold on, there's a bit of music here, then disconnecting the music and letting it play. So you could get the sounds of origami and make your own dubstep origami glue sniffing music.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to buy some super glue to fix some shit. What was I supposed to say? Yeah, you said elevator. Did I ever show you Captain Elevator 4218 or whatever his name was on YouTube?
No.
He's a guy he must be autistic or something. He has a channel where he has now at least 1,300 videos where he rides various elevators. And he just films the elevator, goes in, bling, and it's yeah, nice sound. This is a model from 1968, blah, 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 this and that type of engine. And then he rides the elevator and then it's over. So it's a rather peculiar channel. I should find it and I can link it in the notes, because it's a very curious dive into a very strange side of YouTube that not so many know about. You also have a bunch of people that test light bulbs. And they have hundreds and thousands of videos on their fucking channels. It's rather amazing. But Captain Elevator, he was my favorite.
Yeah, that's some proper old school internet stuff where it's one dude, you can imagine with his GeoCity site back in the day of giving elevator reviews. And
yeah, it's and that thing, over 1,000 videos was on that channel the first time I found it, and that's I don't know, 15 years ago. And now there's even more. He's still uploading new elevators. Incredible. That's even more nerdy than all my habits put together.
That's goes to show, if you think you're strange for doing handstands and stretching a little, you haven't even begun to scratch the surface.
Speaking of, what the hell are we talking about today, Emmett?
I think today we are going to go with beyond your first 30 seconds of a handstand. And,
Yeah. I have the solution, 31 seconds. So thanks for listening to our podcast. If you want to support Handstand Factory.
If you want to get our new advanced beginner program called 32 Seconds in Handstands.
Yeah.
Soon to be followed by the sequel. It's the prequel to 33 Seconds.
Exactly. It's very special.
Yeah.
But beyond 30 seconds, it's actually it's not a bad topic, because I think, first of all, with all of the times and stuff, we've discussed this before with these time units that we use are they're so arbitrary, but of course they do represent some sort of achievement. Sure, 30 seconds is good because it actually means a couple of things kind of more physically in terms of your level of fitness and control and stuff.
Yeah.
If you stood 29 seconds, it's I didn't manage 30 seconds. No, you did 29 good seconds of handstand. It's practically the same shit. All of it is just about ticking that little box about the specific 30 kind of.
And then it's also how do you measure your time? Are you counting the time you get inverted onto your hands? Or do you count when you join the legs together and are perfectly straight and stable, and then start counting? Two very different time measures that a lot of people will find. I mean, I killed 10 seconds just joining my legs and getting my balance established. Or I, done 20 seconds of shaky balance. So, always an interesting thing of how do you time your handstands? It's one of these things.
When it actually starts versus Yeah. I guess people have different standards on it. But for me, I think like I like to be a bit more task oriented with handstand training. I mean, we've talked about this with like treating it more as like what you want to do is achieve the full thing. Kick up, do whatever you wanted in the handstand, balance and so on. Move your legs around or whatever the task was, and then come down in a controlled fashion. So like the chasing of time, I feel is like it's useful definitely to a certain degree, especially early on, since you need to have a little bit of that capacity and so on before having access to do a lot more shit. But
definitely.
But at one point, like it just becomes a numbers game, and I mean some people like that, and that's fair. But
it's definitely
going past 30 is certainly necessary for anyone who wants to go into advanced hand balancing. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things. I think getting beyond, it's that kind of thing. It's like I think numbers are important when you're starting out on your training, just to actually make sure that you're installing the right amount of conditioning and joint preparation and just tissue integrity. But then after that, it becomes kind of like, it's always this debate, particularly in strength training and tissue adaptation stuff, is what causes the adaptation? Is it one long set, or is it cumulative time under tension? So once you're getting your cumulative time under tension, and these downs are very nebulous, you are getting your conditioning in, but you do need certain amounts per set to cause certain amounts of fatigue. So it's definitely that. But when you get to, it's one of those things, like once you get from 0 to 30 seconds is an achievement for most people. Like, okay, I've trained my body to do something that I couldn't do before, and now it is doing it, and now can do it in a sustained manner, and also in a manner that will require you to correct and reestablish balance multiple times until you get it. Once you can actually repeat that a few times in a workout, so you can do 5 sets of 30 seconds in a workout with maybe 10 attempts, you're doing pretty good. You're into you're past the beginner level of handstands and into advanced beginner.
Advanced beginner, I think the kind of that oscillation between conditioning focus and technical focus, I think is at 30 seconds is one of those kind of changing points a little bit for me, because once you have a handstand that you can just hold, like you can kick up, you can do the thing, and you can stay there for a reasonable amount of time, like 10 seconds or 15 seconds or something, and it's kind of hit and miss. To be able to go from that point until a solid 30 seconds, that is going to, or at least you'll be well off doing more conditioning based work, or like actively trying to stay up for longer times to be able to get the 30 seconds, since like there is like tripling the amount of time up is rather significant, not just on the fact of getting up and establishing balance, but like dealing with the fatigue and dealing with like the rougher corrections of over and under balance that starts happening as you stay there for longer. And I think to be able to break 20 is maybe not that much of conditioning. That'll kind of just happen on its own on kind of a fluke or a good set where you were just doing well. But the consistent 30, then you might need to have a little bit more focus on actually trying to reach those 30 seconds. But after, rather than doing the, okay, shit, I got the 30, now I must get the 60. Then again, I think you're probably better off kind of shifting a little bit of focus to a more technical approach again, like moving the legs and starting to do more stuff, because within 30 seconds you have on average the capacity to start doing some movement with the legs, compared to if you have an inconsistent 10 seconds movement with the legs, might just throw you off too often for it to be a big deal or like to matter.
Yeah, it's definitely just one of those things. Just to segue slightly back to one of the points you raised, that it's what I term the acro yoga problem. It's definitely not a shot at acro yoga, but it's something I observed quite early in my training when I was still in circus school before I was coaching. And I'd come back home to Dublin on my holidays, and we have this we have a big enough circus network. It's quite small in the country, but everyone knows everyone, and everyone would meet up in the park. So you'd have juggling, you'd have the jugglers with the acro yoga people, with some aerialists, all meeting up in a park during the summer at the same time to kind of hang out and be weird together. You would see a lot of flyers in acro yoga. They'd be like, oh, my max time is 20, 25, 30 seconds on handstand, but it's not consistent. And I was watching them because I was trying to interesting on this problem as well, and just seeing. And what they had is they're quite flexible. They were quite controlled of the body, but they just were lacking that conditioning to sustain the effort. So occasionally when they were fresh and warmed up properly, they'd nail one, and it would just be like, the wind's blowing the right direction, boom, I got 25, 30 seconds. But then, I don't know, 80% of their attempts would be either failed kick up or failed straddle up, or just would get into balance and just lose it because the swing of balance or the swing of precision was too much, or the save was too big, or the fingers weren't strong enough. And it was that kind of thing. It was just like they were kind of enthusiastic amateurs, basically. They weren't, no one was aiming for super high levels here. Or they were, obviously, in the training, but no one was really doing any focused conditioning in these sessions, and this was the only training they were doing a week. They kind of meet up. Not saying you need to do a lot, but it's like this is where the wall work comes in. It's like, okay, we build capacity with the wall, then we build capacity with the fingers, then hopefully we can put it all together. But it's kind of one of those missing links that if you find this is your situation where you're like, oh, I can do a really long handstand every now and then, but it doesn't happen every time, or it's very inconsistent, like 8 times out of 10 it doesn't happen. Conditioning is the key to fixing this.
Yeah, because it also means that like your body understands well enough what to do so it can do the task, but it's occasional because basically you kind of need the stars to align a little bit for you to be able to pull it off. Whereas if you're like, once you are conditioned enough to do something, it won't be a big deal for the body, and hence you can do it much more often. Yeah. I mean, it's similar to any kind of. I mean, you can even take weightlifting. If you just want to do a bicep curl of 25 kilos, you will need to condition up to doing that. Like it's not something that'll just happen by itself, even though you can curl 12 kind of. So and I also think that when it comes to both bridging the gap, I do think it can be useful to practice like other shapes and stuff, like such as straddle and tuck, and like utilizing the wall in terms of learning to do the various shapes until you're around 30 seconds, but like kind of past the 30 seconds. I think that's when kind of the movements start coming in, because they also add a lot more challenge to per second of balance. They require more focus and perhaps even more strength and energy to do,
definitely with tuck and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I think that is a really useful kind of period, or like thing to spend time on as you kind of have gotten past just the basic like semi-solid 30 seconds, that like new things and like a new kind of focus can come into the training. And like also it gets really dry. I mean, if you just reached 30 seconds and you focused a lot on conditioning, and then you're gonna keep on conditioning until 60, it's gonna be like a snooze fest, I think. At least that's how I would perceive it.
I think you need a bit of a condition. But there's one interesting thing that I do with a lot of people is once they kind of get about, say they have 60 seconds chest to wall kind of handstand, we're done with that, except every now and then for a bit of torture, really. But other stuff is like you can start training the shapes on the wall while the person's learning the free balance. So when they're doing their conditioning sets, they're doing tuck handstands against the wall or straddle handstands and flirting with balance a bit that way. So you're beginning to get an intro to the shape in your conditioning work while you're still learning the free balance up to 20, 30 seconds. Yeah. And then when we come time, it's like, okay, it's time to start working on some shape changing. You have a position to go to from your handstand to another one.
Yeah. Yeah, and then that's the thing, that like whenever you're like to be able to prep for that point where you can do the shape changes, like doing wall work in the various types of positions that you and eventually will move in. Like you will have a frame of reference, so you don't need to build that right away. I think that is a very kind of useful way for looking at kind of the earlier stages of conditioning in terms of the shapes. And then past 30, then you start like basically putting things together. But there's also like the other things that I find funny with like, because as we just said, that like if we assume that a person that can do a solid 30 seconds have a very good control of the two arm handstand to the degree that they'll be able to hit it like much more often than not, and they're able to start doing things in the handstand, then I think like a hugely underestimated thing, like other than just the shape changes, is to start like messing a little bit with the handstands in terms of adding and subtracting pieces and parts, such as like hand width. Okay, you can do like your normal grip with handstand, okay, but you can also just do a narrow grip. It doesn't need to be hand on hand handstand, but just like narrowing the position slightly, suddenly changing things. Or like if you're used to doing handstands on floor, well, now you start doing handstands on blocks, or you do fingerless handstands, like where they have fingers are off a ledge or a block. Those are of course quite a lot harder, but they allow you to take this kind of shape that you have and add a new challenge to it. Or you can do on canes, or even just a height, like for many people, like put them up on like a height of 30-40 centimeters, 50 centimeters perhaps, of just like a kind of a CrossFit box or whatever, and it starts changing things just in terms of the focus. Suddenly like the easy position that you could hold for 30 becomes like you become hyper aware of everything, and you become too careful, and you suddenly need 8 times to kick up again. And these kind of challenges I find to be quite useful and interesting when it comes to moving to the next stage, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of, you're touching on one of these things that is it's one of these things I find is very crucial to developing balance, is variety. It's if you are still doing, if we just think about basically like, if we ignore the body stimulus, but we're learning stimulus to the balance, stimulus and like exposure to different shapes and the balance. You go, oh, if we're doing the same handstand every time, we're doing the same stimulus, basically, same thing. Whereas if we start giving you different things to do, like as Mikael said, narrow the grip, and you know, we're all hand balancers here, and we can be a bit pedantic about being ultra precise and ultra exact on what we do, and it has to be this far spaced, and we have to be in this bit of the gym, and it has to be the light shining this direction, and my song needs to be on, and blah blah blah. But if you start like messing around, like narrowing the stance, widening the stance, just playing around doesn't mean your whole workout has to be this, but adding variety, it's also one of these things, like once you get past this point, is like your body can clearly react fast enough, but if you start thinking about the balance, you start dying because you slow it down. So by adding things that are making you think about something else in a handstand, suddenly you get out of the way of the fingers and the balance doing their work. They'll do it on autopilot while you're already thinking about something. I always find that's an interesting one, of just like, okay, what can I do? You know, shape changing, if we're talking on that, is always it's always the first kind of thing we start with as well, or thing. And you know, we can start with very basic shape changes of like pointing and flexing the feet in a handstand. That's one of the things that what you'll see with a lot of people at, I suppose, the 30-second stage of the handstand is the feet. What do you call this one? Radar feet?
The foot radar.
Foot radar. It's the feet are like doing the balance corrections they would if they were standing when the person's doing it. They're kind of wobbling backwards and forwards. You see the toes are acting, and it's kind of it's funny. If you look at the hands, and the hands and toes are basically making the same movements, but you can eliminate that by giving people a lot of times, like, you know, the cue, like flex your feet, point your feet, flex one foot, point the other foot, and it means you're still working in the straight handstand, but you're beginning to think about your extremities and look at things that way. It's always a little fun challenge to try out.
Yeah, I think the like there's also these other types of challenges that for like the shape and the kind of yeah, the entire idea really of the handstand that I really enjoy, and I think that is also kind of underestimated, such as like walking on the hands, forwards, backwards, sideways, in a circle, jumping on the hands, all these things that like aren't necessarily part of this very rigid structure of handstand teaching, and it's kind of funny because like no one has really decided, like it's basically just the federation decided at some level that this is how, these are the things that are included, and then there's loads of things that are kind of forgotten about a bit, I think, and for my own sake as well, loads of things that I never trained way back, but that I got for free just due to all the breakdancing stuff where you move on the hands all the time. So for me, all of the walking stuff was kind of just like a natural evolution of that. But of course, like walking is kind of its own chapter, but like all of those things add in. They add into kind of the mix what you're able to do up there, and like I think in terms of like both stimulus but also just like the body map and understanding and safety and all this, that like you have all these things that you can do with your body upside down, so why not explore that, so that like, okay, let's say like 10 years down the line you're learning like jump changes on one arm. If you can jump 20 jumps on two arms, like in 10 years that knowledge will still be with you, whereas if you've never jumped on your hands before, hey, you'll need to jump on your hands before you can jump on one, kind of. So there's loads of these things that I think are useful to just take into consideration in kind of the earlier stages of learning process.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things I think a lot of people should be able to do. And I think if your training is good, it should come quite easy. It's just walking on the hands, as you touched on, like forwards, backwards, sideways, just the four main directions. I think it's one of those things that, like, it occurs a lot in like basically almost every acrobatic class or every acrobatic teacher I've had over the years would, as part of their warm up, make you walk up and down the gym. Generally like the four directions, forwards, backwards, and then sideways, half turn in the middle, sideways the other way. So if you're listening in and you want to try that out, particularly the sideways, and then turning circles forwards and backwards. I know we have these in some of the advanced programs, but even in a straight handstand, just turning on the spot is an interesting proprioceptive challenge, we will call it, and it's it's worth trying out. It's these kind of things like, okay, you got this, like this is the thing. When you have 30 seconds, you have something, and now we can use the something for something else. It's not just like, oh, I have something, let's just do more of something. Well, let's try do stuff. And the walking up and down stuff.
I think that's really like the walking stuff. Obviously, is like it's very kind of a staple thing for gymnastics, since you want to teach people to move efficiently through space using the handstand shape. So it's really relevant there. But I think just get like basically building the freedom upside down, and the freedom upside down is more than just being able to move your legs into the nice 4 different shapes that everyone else also do. So
there is only 4 shapes.
Like I in that sense, I'm really grateful for all of the stuff that I did way back in my breaking days, all the kind of the going up and down on the elbows and all that stuff. It translates so much just in the understanding of the body, and I can still do those things now. Like I never practice them, but like they're probably better than ever, just because my strength is pretty solid. But
hashtag free gains.
Yeah, those are pretty much free gains. But like it's also loads of fun, and it adds variety, and like I think also in terms of performative things, if you're into that, like it offers loads of possibilities, since that is ultimately what you want to have a lot of if you're into performing. But we also just need to be able to have fun and have an interesting time with the practice itself. So I think that like the more addition you can have, the better it is. Like I was teaching a private class today with a guy that he had a question about a what's it called, a slight kind of tilt in his body when he was doing a handstand. And I'm sure you've gotten that question many times.
I've gotten that question
as well.
many times. I think I have 6 people messaging me on Instagram about that right now.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, but I'm a bit tilted this way. It's like, and you look at it, it's yeah, you're a tiny bit like that, and like where I before, like maybe 10 years ago, I would be like, oh yeah, this posture, like yeah, you need to change it or else this and that, and like now I barely register because it's like. It's kind of irrelevant, like because he could stand on his hands easy 30 seconds, much more than that. But he had been told a lot that he must fix this or else what? Like I was
Federation
a bit like,
will mark you down.
Yeah, this is like if he spends all this time trying, and he had tried to spend a lot of time on this, and it's like it obviously hadn't led to a change. I was like, just leave it alone, go on, move on, do things. And if you find that every time you're trying to do a press down on 2 arms, for example, just like lowering the legs down, you always fall to this one side and it feels really connected, sure, look into it, because then it's actually doing something to you. It is stopping you from learning a skill. Whereas here it was more like it looks in a certain way, the body likes to do a certain little thing, but not a big deal. Move on and do relevant things instead, which like I mean, over time as well, it does seem to me that like it becomes a lot easier to correct too when you have full control of your body in any given situation. It's just like, oh yeah, the body's a bit tilted like this, I'll just tilt it back. Like I had that happen to me once, where I think it was it was after I hurt my left wrist, like couple of years ago. I hurt my left wrist super bad doing a jump change, and the cane moved and I couldn't stand on my hands or I couldn't stand on the left wrist for six weeks. And when I got my 2-arm handstand back, like it was obviously tilted to the right side. First it was so on purpose, but even like a couple of months after, I was still kind of tilting a bit, probably just out of fear. But it was very easy to fix, because like I know every single centimeter of my body, body's angles and so on when I'm standing in a handstand. So obviously then it's very easy to shift that. So I think it's like, because I do think around the 30-second mark, a lot of people also start like micromanaging, like, oh yeah, but this needs to be perfect, and that needs, and what about this, and what about that, and this and that and this.
It's
just,
good to
stand on your fucking hands.
Yeah, you nailed it kind of there. It's like, I think at the 30-second mark, you do see that kind of micromanaging start to emerge, and the over obsession with the line, and the like your line's not going to be perfect even when you're able to do 60 seconds. Like it's just
most likely not.
It's going to take a while, which is fine, and you need to work on it. But I think it's basically what happens is people have the conditioning to survive the handstand quite nicely, and then they actually begin to get a bit of brain space. And then they start using the brain space to overanalyze what they're doing in a handstand and thinking like, oh, the weight's too much on this side, or I can feel it, or I'm twisting, or I'm rotating. All these kind of things that, they do iron themselves out once your conditioning training and once your flexibility training is kind of on par. And then if it doesn't, maybe it's another issue. But it's that kind of, it's like, oh, my line isn't perfect, or my shoulders are too something, or kind of, then it becomes a near obsession as well with people. And it just shows you got brain space, so it's time to put the brain space to use and confuse yourself again, which leads to a good question, actually. What is the first shape change that you teach people?
I think I like to go from hard to easy first, so that because when you're shifting, like you're going from one point to a second point, and during the movement you will likely make some funky things happen, and you might be making movements which makes you have more problem when you arrive than when you started. So if that means that you start in a straddle and move to legs together, where legs together has a higher center of mass, and where each movement means a lot more in terms of moving your body structure than in a straddle, if you generate problems from the straddle up to the straight, you will likely fall. Whereas if you start in legs together and then lower into a straddle, that is likely going to be easier, unless your straddle handstand is difficult for you, of course, but it's likely going to be easier since you go to a lower center of mass place. But I think straight to straddle is usually the one. For some people, straight to tuck, if they're straddles are just like, because I mean you know, like, so some people just like find a straddle handstand to be really hard simply because like they just don't have the hip flexibility at all, and as soon as they start separating the legs pike, and they don't have the shoulders to pike much or in the hips, and then they just drop. So it depends a bit, but usually it's like straight to straddle.
Yeah, generally straight to straddle as well for myself. I've got one of the ways one of the differs between, I suppose, the way we coach the line a bit is I generally coach people in their straight handstand with a slightly more external rotated legs. It was mainly an aesthetic thing. It was kind of how I learnt. So a bit of nod to that, and I thought it was very important back in the day, but it's not really that important anymore now that I understand it better. But what I like about it is if we imagine the position is a bit more like a ballet first, then all you have to cue people when you're learning is just to drop the legs. And the legs just drop into the right direction because they're externally rotated. They only have one kind of slot to go into. So it's kind of like, it's one of those very easy ones. It's like, go up and just let your legs go down. And then they'll go apart. And it's very simple for people to get it. And then it's one of those ones, like most of the time you try your shape change, you fall out. That's cool. Then you just go back up and try it again. So it's kind of
100 more times.
100 more times. But it's it's one of those ones. It's also by the time I suppose you've gotten to 30 seconds with the way I coach, I'm not sure about when you start introducing other entries. But
it's about the same time or even earlier, really. It could be.
I generally have them earlier.
It could be. But it also depends a lot. Like, I mean, you'll see people with 60-second handstands, but like their shoulders are either in too closed or too open a position, so that they've never built the strength to actually jump up. So I have seen people with like super long holds, but just cannot do the jumps yet due to that, or like just terrible shoulder mobility, or like trouble with hip mobility. So that variation does occur. But I think like, from a consistent 15 and upwards, I think that the entries are definitely worth putting into the equation. And by 30, I think you should be like rather confident at, or like not necessarily, but it's good to start aiming at least towards being confident at entering at least through straddle and through tuck. And like pike, that's probably gonna take some more time unless you are naturally good in underbalance and flexible. And possibly even starting to play with the cartwheels into handstands. Yeah,
it's definitely the entries are one of those nice ones because you can use the momentum in them quite nicely. So you get up to your straddle and you join the legs. You don't have to worry about holding the straddle, and the same with the tuck. And then once I start seeing someone's got a bit of control of them, I tell them to pause. Just pause in the tuck for 2 seconds for a 1 count. Simple. Straighten the legs. Same with the straddle. Jump, pause, join. And you can extend those pauses. Suddenly you already have a shape change going on just by slowing the entry down. But it hasn't become a thing. It's kind of like a rolling stop in the shape. So you don't have to reinitiate the motion or break the moment of inertia. So then it's like, okay, we got this shape change, and then we got the down. And then it's like, if someone can hold the straddle as well, it's kind of one of those nice ones to start looking at the articulations of the knees. So you can hold a straddle handstand. There's not that big a difference between a diamond and a straddle, or a froggy, which is legs bent at 90 degrees. So it's like, okay, I'll just, I'll hold my straddle, I'll bend the leg, I'll bend both legs, I'll bend one leg in. These kind of things. And that it just gives you things to play with and things to think about what you're doing, and then things to look back at on your camera and go, oh my god, what the hell were my feet doing when I was doing that? But that's it. And then like the other one is like straddle to tuck. That has to be my favorite shape change, actually, I have to say.
Oh yeah. That's a glorious one.
That's like, I can basically tell everything I would ever need to know about your handstand by watching you do straddle to tuck. If I'll be able to tell whether you can one arm, I'll be able to tell whether you can press, I'll be able to tell you whether you can do anything else. Probably not endurance is the only thing I can't tell from it. Because it's just like, it shows so much. It's like, it's one of those ones that's easy to kind of pull off, but to do it well, like with the legs, everything arrives at one point and everything expands at one point. To watch that the shoulders, like, don't plant or open too much, or the back stays straight. Or what kind of tuck you pull into. Do you pull into closed tuck? Do you open out into high straddle, then pike as you go down? All these kind of like little variances tell you what's going on. So it's one of these Yeah, it's one of those things you can tell a huge amount from someone's handstand just by getting that one. But it's also one of those ones that's very easy to kind of like tuck up and then immediately kick the straddle. So you can just like tuck up, legs go out, and you'll catch the balance if you're used to straddling quite easy. So you can have quite a lot of success at it very quickly.
Yeah, and I think also like the tuck to straddle gives the it's very easy to see how comfortable a person is with generally just moving the legs, because like a person that's very comfortable with it will go like tuck straddle, tuck straddle, tuck straddle, just like as a machine, and can go like that forever. Whereas someone who's learning it will be very careful in their movements. I think that is like a kind of a general thing where it's easy to kind of assess from seeing leg movements as well. It's just like just like the comfort with which they initiate and do a thing. Like it was funny today in the same class I was teaching, like I had the board on the floor which he was going to handstand on, and I say like, can you show me a kick up? And he's like, yeah. So like I'll have like, look, yeah, please look at my kick up technique. And he takes a step back from the plank. I'm like, okay, the guy has a really long kick up, I thought. And I was like, yeah, I already know how you're going to kick up, he says. And it's like, okay. And he does it. And I just started laughing because like you could see like immediately when I told him to do a kick up, he just like even subconsciously almost, he took a long step back so that he would get into the position where he could do like a long lunge gymnastic style kick up into, which is nothing wrong. That's just like how he had practiced. But it's just very, very interesting. You can sometimes just spot it a lot earlier in people, what they can be able to do compared to or like depending on how they like how the setup is and the kind of the general comfort. And I think when it comes to the, like all of that kind of post 30th second handstand comfort should be kind of like until 20 seconds you are comfortable, like you're having a chill time. It's not a big deal. And when you make it to 30, okay, it gets a bit heavy, but if you practiced it for a few weeks, you'd probably get 32 or 35 or even 37 or 29, but like you'd be in the area. But like a larger part of that time you'd be up, you would be just pretty chill with it. And that's also just reflecting back to what you said before with introducing a lot of these other things. Like it comes naturally because there is headspace, there is time, there is the possibility even for a person to be in handstand, and then you tell them, okay, now tuck, and they'll be able to do that, rather than like if someone is kind of new to that and they go to handstand, you say tuck, they're like, oh, and then they try to tuck and they have fallen before they even gotten halfway, because they're actually like the level of comfort is not as high at that point for them. So I think that like really, really looking for that like comfortable time in the actual handstands is also as important as just pushing the time or doing like really complicated stuff with it as you are past 30.
Yeah, it's definitely it's one of those things I was going to say. What do you find when people start getting the minute for the first time? They're going from 30 seconds, but what shape do you see people hold it the most in? I've got a good answer for this one.
You mean the
so people like if you were to like, this is the thing, you kind of have to informally time things. So whenever I'm training someone, I informally time their stuff, or I'll be timing on a stopwatch, but I won't be telling them, just basically to keep myself from not getting too bored and just get an idea what they're doing. Now, one of the things I've seen over the years is if I make people hold max straddles, once they can do say whatever, they've broken the 30-second barrier, they can do some shape changes, whatever. I just tell them, okay, you're just going to hold the straddle handstand till I tell you to come down or you fall out. And that is when most people will break the 60-second mark. But a lot of them will be like underawed because they're like, oh yeah, but it was only straddle. Whereas like, oh, I want the 60-second handstand. I was like, well, it has to be straight because the federation says so. Yeah, it is kind of interesting that you can start building endurance in lower center of gravity shapes. This is one of the things, like you straddle and half straddle or half split, where you're like, you know, in the half kick up position. Build your time in that where it's actually easier to balance, and then you go, okay, I can do my 45, 60 second, chasing the 60 second. I can do that consistently there. Then I'll join the legs and try build it up on the next one. So it's another interesting approach to building endurance via, instead of hammering the same shape, you work on a different shape, get that, and then work on a harder one and get that, all the way to 60-second pike.
Yeah, 60-second pike. I don't think I've ever done a 60-second pike. I don't think it should be particularly hard, but when I just think about it now, I don't think I've ever.
That's we have to see that on your gram by tomorrow morning. Can you do a pike in your bedroom?
Yeah, but today's rest day. So like I have promised myself to stay off the hands, and I already kind of didn't during the class when I had to demonstrate a few things.
Cool.
So
maybe I'll give that a go tomorrow. Kind of.
Yeah, I mean, that shouldn't be a big deal.
Yeah,
but yeah, I think it's totally fine and pretty smart to play with just various shapes as you're building that endurance too. And yeah, like the head position is also another one that, like, I mean, for people, like the head position is like a bit more tricky in terms of its technique. You can have people with like a 2-minute handstand, you ask them to move the head and they'll fly out if they've never tried it before. But it's certainly a drill that's kind of worth playing with as you're at 30. But also it's the big one that starts at 30 seconds or approximately, and that is working on the press to handstand. So I think that like around 30 seconds is where like because a really, really, really good negative press should take you 15 to 20 seconds anyway. You should be able to at least stand on your hands for 30 before like spending a significant amount of your training on pressing, unless you're one of those that are like a press beast and just take it very quickly.
Yeah, we're going to explain a press beast by if you have really good flexibility and really good active flexibility, or are a planche master, or are both, which is very rare, then you can start working on press on day one, basically.
Yeah. There are some that just like, oh, press, I just, is it like this? And they fly up. So it happens. But on average, you'll have most people who can 30 seconds, their line is reasonable, they have decent control and consistency. And like by the time you have that, your conditioning level is likely so that you can open your legs and then you can start pulling your legs towards your body at least a little bit. So you can at least initiate a negative press. And I think that is kind of like one of the primary, things that signify that you are now ready to begin at least putting more time than just piddling with the press. So I think that is definitely like a good thing to spend your time on, like possibly before chasing 60. I think it would be good to have like a longer period where you just consolidate your 30, you develop a lot of new technical capacity stuff, and you start working on some negative presses and press exercises such as wall, like stomach to wall press downs and deep tucks and all that stuff. And then you might shift your focus to and like, because that stuff is going to get you stronger too. So I've seen several times just someone who has like 25-30 second handstand, they spend a longer period of time working on all these other things. They try to go for a PR on their handstand again. It's like, oh shit, 45 seconds. Yeah. It's because like you mentioned in the very beginning with like the cumulative time under tension and the fact that you technically get more efficient and all of those things together, that just adds up to you being able to stay there longer, even though you didn't specifically work on it, but you got a lot of other things going for it as well.
Yeah, it's definitely that just the upper back strength you gain from like deep tucks and press work, even if you haven't got the press exactly, is just
huge.
Yeah, it's huge, and it just means you can hold. It's one of those things like if you have 30 seconds, you're trying to build endurance. You're basically like you're at the gym, you're trying to build your endurance or your repetitions of your chin-ups, like the classic one. I want 20 chin-ups, and I'm just going to do chin-ups with body weight. It can be a lot faster journey just to like do some strength work, get stronger. Do sets of 2, sets of 3 with your chin-ups, and then try some max endurance ones and see what you gain out of it. And that's, how you get it. And it's the same with handstands. Like, okay, get stronger in your upper back, get stronger in your fingers. Oh, wait, your endurance time has gone up. Why? Because less relative effort. So it's definitely these things to think about in terms of conditioning and other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's or like, I mean, press is also like a big goal in itself. And I think that like some people will hit 60 seconds before doing a press, or like they will like, I mean, some people have a really hard time nailing their 60, and some have a really hard time nailing their press. Some people can do a 2-minute handstand with still being nowhere close to the press. I mean, since it like mobility also takes different degree of time for different people to build, so it's definitely not like a linear thing that can be expected for everyone at all with those. But I think it's definitely kind of the on average benchmark before starting to put significant time into the press is like around the 30, because like we said, like there's so many things that are to be taken for granted by then, and you also save yourself a lot of time and frustration and effort by just building that basic before moving on. And like for me, like I always have this discussion both with myself, and we've talked about it before too, but about like how much to focus on these basics, because there is this kind of fetishization of basics, like basic this, basic that, and like, yeah, if you do the basics, then you get the bro fist, and then like you're doing all good because it's the basics. But are you really challenging yourself? Like, are you actually trying to do something? And I've mentioned before on these casts, like several other great acrobats and enthusiasts that got super good simply because they didn't focus on the basics. So there's something to be said for that too. But like in the beginning, with such things as this, like there are certain levels of basics that are super fucking important. And then like the 30 is such a one. Like it's possibly like after doing the handstand itself, it is kind of the next big one like that. Like then there are several things that are very unlikely to be efficient or interesting for you to train until you've gotten to that point. Whereas like from 30 to 60, like I think it's a bit more shallow, or like the specific difference. I mean, of course, if you want to start doing serious one arm work, you likely should have your 1 minute or beyond. But also the same thing goes from 1 minute to 2 minutes. Like the 2 minutes is like a good baseline, and like I urge anyone who is like more advanced practitioner to get the 2 minutes. But it's still like there is a diminishing returns from 1 to 2 minutes.
There's definitely that kind of thing of, sorry to cut across you.
Go on.
The 2 minute thing is like, I've had so many of my more advanced balancers beat 3, 4, 5 minutes at this stage, but we never work on we never really work on endurance. I just tell them to do it every now and then oh wait, they can do it. And it's really, I use it kind of almost as a benchmark of how their efficiency and how their actual strength development from the one arm training is going. So just to temper, because a lot of people will probably hear this, oh, Mikael said 2 minutes, and they'll be like, I'll write the program, I'll do 5 sets of 1 minute, 110, and then I'll do 5 sets of 115. It's not exactly that. It's like, okay, we're pushing the strength and the capacity in certain directions, and this manifests by like the 2 arm just becoming simplistic. So it's just it's just one of those things to watch out for before the notebook crew come out and go, let's make this template program.
Yeah, speaking of programs, that's also one thing that we're like Handstand Factory wise making, or like it's in the works, and that is kind of a program or a thing that we call Advanced Basics, which is kind of like it's not like a real full large program, but it's a kind of a mini thing which includes a lot of those things that we talked about here, such as kind of narrow grip handstands and like on blocks, on heights, how to use canes, and so on, which are kind of basic things, but that are good additions to kind of the normal things to think about in handstand, like basically tasks and skills that are useful to build up before moving on. But that doesn't necessarily need to be mastered before moving on into one arm practice.
Or presses or other stuff. Yeah, it's always just kind of really interesting. It's like how your handstand journey can go. Handstand journey, TM. Where it's just like once you have the skill, once you have this 30 seconds, you suddenly have like, you know, it's one of those things. It's such a broad skill. That's why I'm still interested in it. That's why I suppose Mikael is still interested as well. It's like, you get your 30 second, you can do it. We'll just say, okay, you can just do a handstand when you can do 30 seconds. You can do it, repeat it. Boom. You can do a handstand. But then it's like, oh, well, you know, maybe I just don't care about my line. I'm just going to keep it however it is, but I'm going to try learn breakdancing stuff. Boom. Or I really want to push the technicality of it, so I'm going to push my line. Okay, cool. Or I want to learn a press. Or even like a handstand push-up. It's one of those things I say to people, like, I can remember my two best students, Josh and Morgan, who, anyone if you've seen Morgan lately, is gone off the radar. He's spent some time in Kiev and thing, but...
superhero.
Yeah, he's immensely good. Shout out to Morgan. Shout out to Josh. Josh is also doing some really cool stuff as well. We're going to unveil some stuff with Josh's in a while. But they came to me and they're just like, they said... initially they wanted to do calisthenics. They were like, oh, we want the one arm chin up and we want the handstand push up. We've been doing calisthenics and, you know, we want planche. And I just kind of said to them, I was like, okay, we need to train some handstands. I was like, well, they're like, do we really need to train handstand? This is before they got addicted to it. And I'm like, well, you want to do a handstand push up, you got to be able to hold a handstand. They're like, okay, well, like, what's the minimum we can do? So I was like, okay, you got to be able to do like 30 seconds handstand, do handstand push ups. And they're like, why? And I'm like, well, you know, your first repetition of a handstand push-up when you're learning it, it's going to take you about 30 seconds to do that repetition. It's taking about 20 seconds. So if you can't like kick up, hold your balance, and then lower down and come back up, particularly if it's a grind fest on a 1RM, it's just going to be, you know, you need your 30 seconds to do your thing. And then it's interesting is like, as you get more efficient to it, your set still only lasts 30 seconds, but you might get 3 or 4 reps in at that time. So... it's kind of like, it's the make or break skill. It's like in I don't know if they have it in breaking, but in juggling they kind of have the rule that like it's an unspoken rule, but unless you can do stuff with 3 balls or can juggle 5 balls, you're not really a juggler. You're just someone who can juggle. You can juggle 5 balls, or if you like spend some time learning some advanced 3 ball stuff, then you're a juggler. Now I'm sure it's a bit gatekeeping-y, but it just gives you an idea of like the set standards in communities that you can go like, okay, now I'm a handstander. And I'd almost say the 30 second is that mark, not the 60 second.
Yeah, it's yeah, but at the same time, as we said in the start, like at least to me, 29 seconds is 30 seconds.
Yeah.
35 seconds is 30 seconds. Like in terms of like what it actually means, other than the precise number and the kind of relationship that we have built now to our to time and to like a minute, because it changes the unit from seconds to minutes, and that kind of becomes a big deal. So like it's just, I think it's so important to not be too kind of stuck to those things as standards.
Yeah,
and I think there is still kind of a little bit too much obsession on that. Like, I mean, I know loads of people, and even really good people, that like to train with a metronome, but that is just like, get that fucking thing away from me. Like, play me some good music, and just like, I'd rather than hearing like the fucking, like, I'm not a machine. I don't want to hear the tick tock and like da 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 and like count and okay, I did 10, which means that yay me, and I did 9, boo, sad face. Like, for me, that's not as interesting of a perspective just on the why and the how to practice, because yeah, you like, even though you are chasing these goals, like some level of just enjoyment, I think is important. And at least like, I mean, no offense if you like to use a metronome, that is basically just a preference, but to not be too attached to the success and failure depending on like the exactness of what your stopwatch or your metronome says, basically.
Yeah, it's also that kind of thing. I'm sure you've encountered this as well. I've encountered many times of people who begin to make these benchmarks, the precise benchmarks, too big a thing. And then it's like, oh, I can't break 60 seconds in a handstand. And they're going like, oh, I get 58 seconds or 55 seconds. Or thing. It's like it becomes a milestone that just becomes unbreakable because you kind of put a mental barrier on it. And then you distract the person, and then suddenly they break it, or these kind of things. So it's kind of like we need standards, but we don't need tight standards, is almost what I'd say.
Yeah, at least like they need some leniency in terms of the like, because doing the thing with control, completing the task, if it's a 1-arm, if it's a 2-arm, if it's a press, great stuff. But the kind of the numbers chase is, like, as we just said, like towards 30, it's really great. But from there, like, just remember the diminishing returns, and remember that like there is like your set was not less valuable for your level of learning if you did 28 seconds compared to if you did 32. And I do know, and I've had several people contact me that have built up perhaps they have like kind of a pedantic personality, or very like kind of they adhere a lot to these kind of number codes that treat it very strongly as kind of a something to do with success and failure. And I just think that it's important to kind of call bullshit on that, because your nervous system doesn't at all experience the stimulus any different whether or not you are doing what or like depending on what the clock said. So I just think that like for me that is a little bit of kind of bottom line on how to treat the kind of time thing.
Yeah, I think we'll just leave it there. Actually, I think it's a good point to wrap it up.
Yeah. Bottom line time thing, kaboom.
Bottom line, time is an arbitrary thing made by man, and if we worked on a different kind of timing schedule.
Holy fucking shit, by the way, Emmet, now I need to tell you something really, really important that I saw on YouTube today. Jesus Christ. I woke up, I click on YouTube, the first thing I was super tired, and I found a video of a guy who had done time calculations. Do you know what's that game called? It's called Roller Coaster Tycoon. Have you ever played that?
Yeah, well, I haven't played it, but I know it.
Yeah, so to you who are listening, a Roller Coaster Tycoon is basically this like old PC game, like really kind of like.
I think it's been updated recently. I think it's like there's a new one.
Probably, but basically like it's you're basically running an amusement park. It's like Sim City, like really old school graphics and all that. And there's a guy that had done some like what's it called, some probability calculations on sending all of the people coming into the amusement park into a maze. And he had built a maze so that if he built a maze so large that it covered the entire map, and he would calculate how long it would take the people to walk through it. And it was a number that was like it had zeros equivalent of 6 word pages full of zeros, 1 and 6 word pages full of zeros. So it was so absolutely ridiculously stupid. So I just lie there with my eyes half open and listen to the fucker explain the statistic, like the mathematics between having a fucking little walking amusement park visitors in a video game walking through a maze in like basically the heat death of the universe. Like that kind of calculation of how long the universe will last was like microscopic compared to this unit of time that it would take for a person to walk through the maze. So now you know that. So I can link the thing in the fucking description because it's very important.
We'll just put this as like. We'll just put that video as the description and nothing else. Can you hold your handstand longer than the heat death of the universe? That's what we're looking for.
It was pretty grand, actually. But if you're going to watch the video, you need to see the ending, because like the beginning is just like has some people walk into like a basic 10-tile maze, and it wasn't so interesting. But it got fucked up and off the rails after a while. But yeah, I guess that's it for us. That's at least it for me.
Mikael is being sent away.
Just like, bye, guys.
I'm just cutting the call now.
Rip.
Right, yeah. Anyway, just to wrap up, thank you all for listening in. If you want to support us at Handstand Factory and buy any of our programs, that would be awesome. We're gonna be doing some cool stuff soon. We've got some filming coming up. I suppose if you're listening in the future, we've probably already done it. We're going to be doing new programs. We're probably going to do some live Zooms as well while Mikael's in Dublin, so that'll be cool.
Definitely.
Yeah, so if you got one of our programs, just check the Reddit forum, and there'll probably be a newsletter going out with some details on that. Other than that, yeah, thank you all, and we'll speak to you next week.
Cheers.